So it's a pleasure, it's a joy to be with you in this fine evening. And today, as we have already gone through some of the discussions, especially based on the Old Testament, today our venture will be to deal with the what's called the Pentateuch. And as you know, first of all, let me say that it's a very vast subject comprising 5 books and constituting the fundamental theology of the Old Testament as well as the whole Bible. So to say, it would be really a tedious task to complete, to have a comprehensive vision of the Pentateuch within a short time, so to say 1.5 hours. But let's try what's possible for us. Let's try what's possible for us. I don't have any specific intention to cover the whole portion, but what's my intention is to make you clear what is possible. What is possible. So here, as we talk about the reality of Pentateuch, as you know, this is that kind of that part of the biblical body, so it is consisting of the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So these 5 books are considered to be the Pentateuchal writings. So along with that, continuing with the 5 books, still there are books, so to say, beginning with Joshua, Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, Ruth, etc. These books are belonging to the category of historical books, according to the Catholic canon. So what is important for us to deal with the first 5 books? First 5 books. Here, when we speak about the first 5 books, you see the consideration of the Pentateuch can be from different levels, from different angles. First of all, let me say, we are going to deal with a kind of history. We can come across a lot of multiple sources of historical evidences. But at the same time, I would say we have to be very attentive and specific to the details to comprehend the reality of this historical presentation. In other words, so to say, we can say, sometimes people may ask, look at the Bible, especially in the first 5 books, there are a lot of questions that can be emerged. A lot of questions are confronted in the day-to-day life, especially among the religions, among the common people. There are a lot of questions about the first books. For example, the creation of the world and the reality of the historical elements that is being dealt in the first 5 books, the origin of the humanity, the period of Abraham. So to say, the Protestants are, in a way, some of the Protestants are even tempted to specify the date of Adam, Eve, etc. So comparing with other religions also, there can be multiple questions that can emerge from this complex situation. But at the same time, I would say our attempt is to look at the reality of this Pentateuch with a specific intentions, theological intention. What is important here is to note the intention of the author, biblical author. Of course, as an introduction, I would say, in the presentation of the Pentateuch, there are historical elements. It's a very clear historical presentation. But sorry to say, this historical presentation is not according to the terms and conditions of the modern historicity. So you cannot come across the historical elements as you expect. For example, if you want to know certain things about the history of something, of Israel, of the Canaanites, of different religions, or the people who are living along with Israel, you have to cross-check, you have to go across the historical books that may treat the historicity of the different cultures or the peoples. But the specific intention of the Bible is not to present the history. The specific intention of the Bible is to present the salvific history. We have to be very attentive. The salvific history. And that's why many important things, according to our consideration, are left out. What is important for the author is to present a history, a salvation history. So here, salvation history means, in a way, single expression is that the history interpreted. The interpreted history. The history is not recounted as it is taken place. The history is reinterpreted by the author with a specific intention. For example, I will tell you, you just think of the situation in the New Testament. So there we come across the most important figure, Jesus Christ. Then the second figure next to Jesus is Blessed Virgin Mary. Then Saint Joseph, then the apostles. But let's concentrate on the presentation of Blessed Virgin Mary or Saint Joseph. Luke has presented only 5 times Blessed Virgin Mary. John only twice, in the beginning as well as the end. A figure who has such an importance after Jesus is presented only very few times, a few occasions. And you see, with regard to the Assumption of Blessed Virgin Mary, with regard to the birth of Blessed Virgin Mary, with regard to the virgin birth of Jesus, with regard to the, especially with regard to the figure of Mary, there are no indications. With regard to the death of Saint Joseph, the evangelists have contributed so profusely, have written a lot of elements connected with the life of Jesus. Why didn't they just present 2-3 sentences to conclude the death or the Assumption of Mary, or to present the detail of the death of Saint Joseph? Just one sentence would have been enough to resolve the crisis. Why didn't they do that? Echo, this is the single response. The intention of the biblical author is not to present Blessed Virgin Mary. The intention of the biblical author is not to present Saint Joseph. The intention of the divine author is to present Jesus Christ and the salvation that is being realized in and through his person. And the characters associated with his salvific mission are mentioned according to their relevant interventions. So the intention of the author is not to present a particular figure in the Bible. So the same pattern is seen in the New Testament as well. So the intention of the author is to have a clear interpretation of the history, not the real presentation of the history. So to know the history of certain things, you have to go to the historical books to know the history of the ancient times. To know, of course, there can be cross references. There can be so many elements connected with the profane history recounted in the biblical history. There can be so many coincidences, but at the same time, I repeat, this is not the intention. This is not the intention. So someone may ask you, see, there are a lot of errors in the Bible. What about the reality and the originality of the Bible? This is a simple response. Intention of the Bible is that to present the salvation history that is being culminated and realized in and through the figure of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. So when we look at the reality of the Pentateuch, there can be several considerations to study to approach the Pentateuch. The first of the approaches can be cultural. Cultural. According to this cultural approach, a particularity is there. What is essential is presented. What is essential? Essentiality. What does it mean? The events, different episodes of divine interventions, different magnificent figures are appearing one after another. And these episodes are recounted in order to have a particular salvific dimension. So essentiality is one of the characters from the cultural perspective. And another attitude that has been prevalent in writing the Pentateuch is idealization. Idealization. Certain figures, certain events, certain episodes are presented in order to be projected as ideal events or personalities. Idealization. Third element can be a lot of concentration is given to the significances, the meanings, not to the elaborations, not to the detailed recounts, but to the specifications, but to the specifications and to the significances. And the fourth element can be there is a great tendency to move from the particular to the universal. From the particular to the universal. So certain episodes, for example, the presentation of the figure of Abraham, of Moses, in the first 5 books of the Bible, have created a great impact. Not only this impact exerted by the figure of Abraham is not simply limited to the 5 books, but it's just an opening wide to the rest of the biblical books in the Old Testament as well as in the New Testament. So it's a kind of what's called a going away from the particular to the universal. Universal. Another important dimension is it's a tentative to present the present idea, the present situation in the past. Or, other words, it's a tentative to evaluate the present in the light of the past events or episodes. I would make it a little more clear how the present can be interpreted, can be re-elaborated, can be re-evaluated on the light of the past episodes and situations. So to say, the first 5 books constitute the fundamental procedure, the fundamental what's called the steps in the composition of the Bible. As you know, the composition of the Bible has a very long, tedious journey, consisting of almost 1,100 years. My dear friends, I just really want to ask you pardon. I'm just suffering from some kind of serious allergy. Here in Europe, it's a time of drastic changes of the nature. So I am suffering from allergy. So it remains almost for more than 1 month. There is no particular treatment also. So sorry to disturb you. So the history of the Bible, the composition of the Bible has almost 1,100 years, beginning from the time of David. That's in the 10th century before Christ till the 1st century after Christ. So to say, almost it's a result of the process of 1,100 years. 1,100 years. And Pentateuch is the first of the biblical corpus that has been composed. The 5 books. And as you know, may not be possible to enter into this region, this area to talk about it, but at the same time, I would just indicate, you see the composition of the books, it's not the result of a century or 1 or 2 centuries, as we have seen. Almost more than 40 authors, 1,100 years, many generations are involved. And in the process of the composition of the biblical texts, don't think that you are all students of the Bible, so you may know that, but the ordinary people may think that. All on a sudden, a fine morning, someone gets up, takes a cup of tea, and begins to write Genesis chapter 1. Okay, the second morning, gets up, takes another cup of tea, writes the 2nd chapter of Genesis, finishes. And the 3rd day, gets up, continues the 3rd chapter. No, that's not the thing. You know the situation. Some pieces, some parchments, some fundamental verses, some ideas, episodes are recounted in the initial stage. And every single text in every book has been undergoing load of transformations, redactions continuously from generations to generations. And it comes up to 4th century. Our book, Pentateuch also, the entire corp, the corp Pentateuch is redacted, edited between 450 and 400. So today, the last phase of the redaction, the final phase of the edition of Pentateuch is almost taking place around 400 BC. A work that has been started right from the time of Moses, even before. Then you can just imagine how many centuries are involved in the process of the composition of the Pentateuch alone. Then you see, look at other 68 books. You can just 27 books of the New Testament you can just exclude, but you just consider other books of the Old Testament. So it's a long process. And in this long process, what is important to know, you see, it's in the 7th century. I want to say a little bit of the historical background, otherwise you may not get it. In the 7th century, in the 6th century, yeah. Between 597, in 597 BC, of course, Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar has started the besiege of the southern kingdom, Judah. But they were the Judah was placed under the attack of the Babylonians. The tight situation, the grim situation continued almost for 10 years, exactly from 587, there is a notorious process of the Babylonian exile. From 587 till 539 is the almost 50 years is the period of Babylonian exile. And a Bible student has to always remember, especially a student of Old Testament, the importance of this period. So to say the Babylonian exile has touched the entire life of the Israelis, the religious dimension of the people of Israel in the Old Testament. Each and every nook and corner of the religious dimension of Israelites are just shaped through the, so to say, tragic experience of the Babylonian exile. The Babylonian exile was such a strong experience that it has really influenced the people to think of the past history. These 50 years of their experience in Babylon, you see Psalms, you see the Old Testament, the lamentations of the people of Israel from Babylon. What does it mean? Israel has lost its land of origin. She has lost her people. She has lost her identity. She has lost completely her religious identity. And what's the situation? The people are dragged. In the wake of the huge war that's taken place, there's a big deportation from Judah to Babylon. And as a result, what happened? The Israelites who were dragged, who were just placed in Babylon, had lost the contact with the real religion of their own. Then they had to just associate with the pagan religions and religious practices. And as a result, there's a serious crisis of their religious identity. In the wake of this serious religious identity, you see many prophets also are involved in this detrimental exilic experience. For example, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, second Isaiah, etc. The prophets, important prophets of the time. And you can see the prophetic world is really controlled by these mighty prophets. And their experience comes from this tragic Babylonian experience. So on the sitting in the shadow of this painful experience, they are just forced to think of their past experiences. And in the light of the present Babylonian exile, the authors are forced to reinterpret their first exilic experience that they have come across in Egypt. Even the Egyptian exile is reinterpreted in the light of the Babylonian exile. So to say, so this is the story. This is what I am telling. This is what I was telling. The present has contributed to the redaction or the modification of the past. That's one of the elements that has contributed to the composition of the Pentateuch. Okay, let's come back now. You see, this is a more or less historical ambience in which the composition or the different considerations in the composition of the text is taking place. And this is the cultural point of view. And from the faith point of view of the faith, there are certain things. Here, in the recounting of the Pentateuch, we were talking about the approaches that are placed in the composition of the book, in composition of the Pentateuch. And I told you the first approach is cultural. The second one is faith or religious, so to say. What would be the first element to be treated here? You see, there are historical elements already well associated in the recounting of the salvific process completed by God. Historical elements. Then the religious dimension gives a clear idea of the presence of God in the history of Israel. Presence of God in the history of Israel. Presence of God. And the third element will be the reflection of the people of God. A religious reflection of the people of God about the past realities of God's interventions. So these are two important considerations, so to say. Religious can be theological and cultural. Okay, these elements have contributed to the composition of the first 5 books of the Bible. Now, entering into my intention is not to touch each and every single biblical what's called among each and every book of the Pentateuch. It's not possible. It's not possible, absolutely, as you know. I would like to give you an introduction to the Pentateuch, actually, the different dimensions. And in the second hour, we will touch a little bit of the theology, the basic, the heart of the theological contribution of Pentateuch. Now let's see by way of introduction. You see, the first book, the first 5 books have got its own real origin. It's called in Hebrew, it's called Hamisha Humsha HaTorah. Hamisha Humsha HaTorah. The 5 books, that is law. The 5 books of the law. And it has got its Greek traditional Greek translation, He Pentateuchos. He Pentateuchos. Pentateuchos. Actually, the word Pentateuch, see, Pentateuch comes from Greek language. Penta means the 5. Teukos means the scroll. Therefore, when we say Pentateuch, means 5 scrolls. Actually, its meaning was 5 scrolls in the cylindrical form. 5 scrolls in the cylindrical form. And actually, this is the tradition followed by, of course, this is a tradition originated in Septuagint. You may know the different Bibles in different languages in the Old Testament. Hebrew Bible, Tanakh. It's called, Hebrew Bible is called Tanakh. Then this is only to tell you by way of an introduction. And then the Greek Bible is called Septuagint. Then you may know the Latin Bible, Vulgate. Vulgate. Then you may know that the Syriac Bible, Peshitta. Okay, so these are the different versions of the Bible. So in the Greek Bible, the original introduction is in the original presentation is in the Hebrew, Tanakh. Then the first translation that has taken place in the 3rd century, between 3rd and 2nd century before Christ, was Septuagint. And in the Septuagint, the name used is Pentateuch for this. According to the Greek tradition, Alexandrian tradition, not in the Pentateuch. According to the Alexandrian tradition, the term used to indicate these 5 books is Pentateuch. 5 scrolls. You see, in the 2nd century AD, after Christ, Ptolemy, an agnostic writer of the time, made use of this term, Pentateuch. Then Origen, in the 3rd century, Origen has used this term, Pentateuch. And following the Alexandrian tradition, the tradition of the Pentateuch, the tradition of the Greek tradition, we, so to the Catholics, we have adopted the same tradition. We have just sustained the same tradition in the tradition of the Vulgate as well. Vulgate, the Latin Bible. So to say, we just follow the tradition of the Pentateuch, tradition of the Septuagint. And the Septuagint has got another name, so to say, by Alexandrian Bible, because it has been originated in Alexandria, in Egypt. So these first books, according to the Greek terminologies, the first book is called Genesis. It speaks about the origin of the world, origin of the human beings, origin of everything. Then the second book is called Exodus. Simply it means exit. What would be the central idea of this book? As the term indicates, exit. It speaks about the slavery of the people of Israel in Egypt and their coming out from the slavery after 430 years of terrible experience in Egypt, and their march, they're walking in the desert, open desert, and what's called the very decisive covenantal relationship by which they are bind together by the Lord. So exit. It is mainly concentrating on the coming out of the people of Israel from Egypt. Then the third book, Leviticon. It's a book of Levites, consisting or just contributing the rules and regulations for the priests. Mainly the content, the rules and regulations for the priests and the Levites. And the fourth book, Arithmoi. We call it in English numbers. Why it's called Arithmoi? Why it's called numbers? Because you see, when you come across the fourth book, Numbers, especially in the first four chapters, there you come across a continuous recounting of different senses. Senses, one after another, is presented there. The numbers are presented. The numbers of different tribes, the settlements, etc., are presented in the first 4 chapters. Therefore, the concentration is mainly on the numbers. Then the 5th book, Deuteronomy, it's called Deutros Nomos. Deutros Nomos. Deutros Nomos. Here, it means a copy of the law. Deutros means second. Nomos means law. Law. Here you can think of a possible confrontation, possible confusion. Because as I told, we may not get time to go to the individual books, but at the same time, just to see. Here it's because of a confusion. It's a confusion. If you have the Bible, you just take Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 18. Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 18. There you can read in this way. When he becomes king, he is to have a copy of the book of God's laws and the teachings made from the original copy kept by the Levitical priests. A copy of the book of God's laws and teachings. A copy. You know that actually in Hebrew it's called Mishnah HaTorah. Mishnah HaTorah. Mishnah HaTorah. HaTorah means in Hebrew the law. Mishnah, this word can be Mishnah HaTorah. Mishnah HaTorah. Mishnah HaTorah. This word Mishnah can be interpreted in 2 ways. The first way, it can mean a copy. A copy. And at the same time, it can mean second. Second. So applying to the context, it can mean, either it can mean a copy of the book, a copy of the law, or it can mean second law. Once it is interpreted, once it is adapted in the Greek tradition, what did they do? They just accepted the second meaning. So to say, second law. Second law. But at the same time, it can mean copy of the law, copy of the same law, not another law, copy of the same law. Second law means a law that is different from the first one. You understand the difference? When we say the copy of the law means, it can be a copy of the same law. But when we say second law means, it can mean entirely different law other than the first one that is prescribed. So that's why from this confusion has really emerged the title Deuteronomy. 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 Deutros Nomos. Second law. Second law. Okay, this is the Greek tradition. And when we come to the original Hebrew tradition, Hebrew, How these books are named. It's interesting to know. See, these books are named after the first important word that is being used in every book. For example, so only to say an example, you see the first book, Genesis. It begins something like this: Bereshit bara Elohim Hashamayim ve'et. Bereshit bara Elohim Hashamayim ve'et. Bereshit bara. Bereshit means in the beginning. In the beginning. So here means Bereshit means in the beginning. That's the name of the first book, according to Greek, according to Hebrew canon. Bereshit is Genesis. Genesis in English is called Bereshit in Hebrew, and it means in the beginning. And this word is specifically used because this is the first word that is being used to introduce the book. And in the modern world, popes also are making use of the same tradition. Encyclicals, etc., are named after the name of the first important word that is being used. See, so here the first book is called Bereshit. Second book, so to say, Exodus, is called Shemot. Shemot means it means names. Shemot means names. You see, there are no comparisons, there are no similarities between the Greek tradition and the Judaic tradition. There are no similarities at all. The names also are entirely different from one another. So the second book is called, in the Greek tradition we know, it's called Exodus. And it's called in the modern language in English also Exodus. But here you see, in Hebrew it's called Shemot, means names. And the third book, Leviticus, is called Vayikra. Vayikra means and called. Simply means and called, and that's the beginning. Vayikra. Leviticus is called Vayikra. Numbers is called the Bemidbar. Bemidbar. Be is the preposition. Be is the preposition. Midbar. Midbar, it means desert. Bemidbar means in the desert. So this is the first word used to begin the narration of the book of Numbers. Bemidbar, in the desert. And the fifth book, Deuteronomy, is called Dabarim. Dabarim. Dabarim means words. Dabar, word. Dabarim, plural. Words. Dabarim, words. Okay, these are the introductions. Okay, and there are the auto testimonies, the self-presentations of the Bible itself with regard to the presence of these 5 books. And there are a lot of indications of the 5 books within the Bible. And so to say, how they are called the law. The law. There are indications of the law. Because as we know, in the Hebrew tradition, it was called Torah. Torah. In the Hebrew tradition, in the Greek tradition, it was 5 scrolls, Pentateuch. But in the Hebrew tradition, it became Torah. Torah means law. Law. That's why you see Tanakh, T-E-N-A-K-H. T-N-K. The Hebrew Bible is called Tanakh, consisting of 3 letters, T-N-K, Tanakh. T means Torah, N means Nebim, K means Ketubim. Tanakh. Therefore, in the Greek, in the Hebrew tradition, the T means Torah. So the Pentateuch was oriented to designate the characteristic of the law. So there are a lot of testimonies, internal testimonies to present the reality, to project the reality of the five books. So to say, I would say some of the examples, we don't have the time to go elaborately, some of the expressions that can indicate the presence of the 5 books right from the beginning. As I was telling, you see the process of the evolution of the text, evolution of the books, in spite of all these difficult situations. You see, right from the beginning, there are references to the existence of this particular body called Pentateuch, and where it's called the law of the Lord, the law of Moses, the book of the law, the book of the law of Moses. All these are different expressions to indicate the presence of this body. Then at the same time, you see, there are indications of the law and prophets in the New Testament also. Even you see in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, verse 17, Jesus speaks about the law and prophets. In the New Testament, there are a lot of references. Then there is also an expression, Moses and the prophets. Then again in the New Testament, all these are references in the New Testament. Law of Moses, prophets, and Psalms. Look, Luke presents it. The law of Moses, prophets, and Psalms. So there are different indications of the presence of these 5 books. Also, another important thing to note, you see, it is said the Psalms are divided into 5 groups representing the 5 books of the first 5 books of the Bible. Psalms are divided into 5 groups representing or denoting the first books of the Bible. The first 5 books of the Bible. How they are divided? Psalms 1 to 41, 42 to 72, 73 to 89, 90 to 106, 107 to 150. These are the 5 divisions: 1 to 41, 42 to 72, 73 to 89, 90 to 106, 107 to 150. These are the 5 divisions of Psalms, and the theologians associate these 5 divisions to the first 5 books of the Bible. First 5 books of the Bible. Another interesting thing, you see in the New Testament, the Gospel of Matthew, there are 5 important conclusions, 5 discourses and conclusions in the Bible, in the Gospel of Matthew. 5 discourses and 5 conclusions. Where are they? 7:28, 11:1, 13:53, 19:1, 26:1. See, these 5 blocks indicate the 5 first books of the Bible. Then another indication of the presence or the importance of the Pentateuch in the whole structure of the Bible. See how St. John begins the gospel. Enarche. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. See, enarche. Enarche. En hotevos means, you see, in the beginning there was Word. In the beginning. The book of Genesis also begins in the same pattern. In the beginning, God created heavens and the earth. You see, St. John is repeating or following the exactly the same tradition of Genesis. Genesis means you can imagine the influence exerted by the Pentateuch on the rest of the biblical compositions. This is another what's called evidence that's coming from the Bible itself. From the Bible itself. Now, with regard to the structure, etc., of the Bible, I don't know, Father, whether you'll have some doubts now to clarify or towards the end. Sometimes we may go a little more further, and I can give you a little bit of time for the clarification of the doubts, etc., as you prefer. Okay, let's go forward. Let's go forward. Okay, see here, another important thing is to consider the different hypotheses that's proposed with regard to the formation of the Pentateuch. Different hypotheses there. And there are people, or the prevalent affirmation is that Moses is the author of the Pentateuch, Moses is the author of the Pentateuch. And as you know, there are a lot of references that give the credit to Moses as the writer of Pentateuch. The historical books, wisdom literature, and the prophetical books, all these books bear witness to the authorship of Moses. Authorship of Moses. Along with that, you see, in the Pentateuch itself, God tells Moses to write down. Write down. God tells Moses, exhorts Moses to write down. You see, Exodus chapter 17:14. 17:14, Exodus 17:14. 24:4. 34:27. Then in the book of Numbers, 33:2. Numbers 33:2. Deuteronomy 31:9. Etc. There are a lot of indications that Moses is the author. God tells Moses to write down. But at the same time, you see, there are no clear evidences that Moses is the single author of the Pentateuch. So far, till recently, till 19th century, this was the prevalent affirmation from the part of the Jews as well as Christians. But due to the emergence of Illuminism, a philosophical, a religious, social, political development that has taken place in Europe, then in the United States, then in the Western world, This philosophical, it's more or less a philosophical approach. It has really questioned the authorship of Moses. The authorship of Moses. Then as a result, what has happened? People began to study. People began to study. Work hard on the question of the authorship of Moses. So as a result of the study, they could come across a lot of discrepancies, a lot of contesting elements that can really stake claims, that can just question the claims of the Mosaic authorship. Mosaic authorship. For example, I would say, one of the examples, you see, Deuteronomy chapter 34, there are 34 chapters in Deuteronomy. And in the final chapter, there is a presentation of the death of Moses. How can Moses be the author of this part? There is a presentation of the death of Moses. See, one of the contesting elements. And there is also another expression in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 3, verse 14, 34:6, Deuteronomy, where this expression, this particular expression is creating a lot of provocation, a thought provocation. So to say, till today, till the date of today, till the modern day, until now, means someone is recounting, someone is presenting a reality that has been taking place from a long time, and it's being continued until now. Until now. See, the real timing of the events recounted in the Pentateuch and the presentation of this author in Deuteronomy chapter 3:14 are different. Especially, you see, the time of Moses is entirely different from that of the time of the one who is presenting now this particular verse, this particular expression. These are two different expressions. Then also it is that you see Genesis chapter 12, verse 6. Another expression. I'm telling you some of the examples through which the unique authorship of Moses can be contested. Even though this is a global affirmation that Moses is the author, but it can be contested. I am just pointing you some of the important indications. You see, another thing is that in those days, Canaanites were living in the country. In those days, Canaanites were living in the country. Those days means referring exclusively to the timing of Moses. The timing of the time of Moses is exclusively referred to. Then what does it mean? At the time of Moses, there were Canaanites, means the one who is recounting the story, the event, is living entirely in a different epoch. Living in an entirely different epoch. So it cannot be the same author. Same author. So there are a lot of things to be discussed in this way. So there are geographical considerations. I would just like to say, you see, the geographical consideration is that Genesis chapter 50, 10. There it is said, on the other side of Jordan. On the other side of Jordan. It's speaking about the presence of the author who is remaining on the other side of. The reality is taking place, the episode is taking place on the other side, and the author is living on the other side. Do you get me? The events are taking place on the one side, but the author is on the other side. That's why the recounting is that on the other side. On the other side of the river Jordan. That was the context. So to say clearly, what does it mean? The one who is recounting the episodes of Genesis chapter 50 is already there in the promised land. In the promised land. And he is telling, and he is recounting on the other side of the Jordan. So to say, it's called in the modern language, Transjordan. Transjordan, Cisjordan. Transjordan means that the present Jordan, present Jordan, on the eastern side of the river Jordan, on the eastern side of the river Jordan is called Transjordan. The western side of the river Jordan is called Cisjordan. And Cisjordan is that part of the promised land. One who is there already in Cisjordan, in the promised land, and tells on the other side of Jordan, means he's already there in the promised land. But do you see, Moses was never in the promised land. Moses was never in the promised land. He couldn't enter into the promised land. He died before. Such kind of lot of discrepancies are there in the recountings. But at the same time, what would be the Catholic position in telling that? We hold that. You see, the importance, the Catholic position is that the authorship of Moses cannot be refuted. Moses, as the author of Pentateuch, cannot be refuted. You cannot simply deny. But the Catholic position is that along with Moses, there are other redactors. There are other contributors who have contributed or they have redacted, edited to complete the Pentateuch. Complete the Pentateuch. So these are some of the what's called introductory notes with regard to the composition of the what's called Pentateuch. And the most important element in the Pentateuch is so to say the concept of alliance, the concept of covenant. This is the most important theological center of the book of Pentateuch. Actually, you know, the story of Pentateuch can be summarized in this way. It's a story starting from Genesis, starting from the creation of the world, humanity, punishment, proving fidelity, and the time of the patriarchs. 4 patriarchs are there: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. And the 4th one is Joseph. And along with Joseph, his successive generation ends up in Egypt. And that's the beginning of the Egyptian slavery. And there is the continuation of the people of Israel in Egypt. After 430 years, under the leadership of Moses, the people are liberated from Egypt. They have a long march in the desert. They come to Sinai. There they make a most important Sinaitic covenant with the Lord. Again, they undertake the march. They move in the desert, and they move around the desert almost 40 years. And finally, they enter into the promised land. This is the content of the Pentateuch. This story, this is the total content of the Pentateuch. In this recounting, you see what is very important is the presentation of the what's called the Sinaitic covenant. The Sinaitic covenant. And I would say here the theological part, the Sinaitic covenant is the heart of the people, of the identity of the people of God. The group that is liberated from Egypt is called a group, people. But through the Sinaitic covenant, they are called people of God. People of God. You see the importance of this movement. In the, as we say, the episode of the Sinaitic episode is at the center of the religious experience of the people of God. The Sinaitic covenant is at the center of the religious identity of the people of God. This is a fundamental statement. In the Old Testament, the Sinaitic covenant is the fundamental or at the heart of the religious experience of the people of God. How can it be? How can it be? There are many elements to be treated. You see, first of all, I would say this is a literary consideration. Literary consideration, according to which I would say the what's called Sinaitic experience is the fundamental or at the heart of the religious experience of the people. While you see, in the Old Testament, just please listen to me. This is something very, very what's called a center to the. It's something at the center of the religious identity of the people. In the Old Testament, the fundamental religious experience of the people of God that has been so decisive in living out the religious identity was first of all Exodus experience. Exodus is the decisive event, even the what's called in the, as a general we can say, the religious identity of the people. In the Exodus event, at the heart of the Exodus event is the Sinaitic covenant. Sinaitic covenant. In the heart of the Sinaitic covenant, the most important, the heart of the Sinaitic covenant are the 10 commandments, where there are both elements of sacrifices and laws. Sacrifices and laws. So to say, Decalogue, 10 commandments are in the heart of the Sinaitic covenant. Among the 10 commandments, what would be the center? Jesus himself has summed it up. There are 2 pivotal commandments: love of God and love of the neighbor. 2 pivotal commandments. And again, going to the heart of these 2 commandments, what would be the center? Love. It can be said love. Simply love. So it is the heart of the Old Testament is love. You see how beautiful is that expression for the New Testament. Jesus just culminates this process. Jesus just culminates this process. So to say the sum and substance of Bible, the Old Testament as well as in the New Testament, is love. I just repeat once again, just to think. The basic religious experience of Israelites is Exodus. In the heart of the Exodus exilic experience, Sinaitic covenant. The heart of the Sinaitic covenant, Decalogue, 10 commandments. In the heart of the 10 commandments, 2 commandments, love of God, love of the neighbor, and placing together these 2 commandments at the center, one can see love. That's the reality. So you see the center of the Pentateuchal theology. And literally also, I would say, what would be the importance of the Sinaitic covenant? As I told, among this process, you see once people, a simple group, mendicant group, moving around, wandering people, is made people of God in and through the enactment of the Sinaitic covenant. So that's importance. You see here, for example, literary consideration is there. I would just like to present to you as the center. You see Exodus chapter 1 to 10. There you come across the presentation of the people of God in Israel, in Egypt. Exodus 1 to 10. Continuation. Exodus chapter 11 to 15. You see the expression of the first Passover, and they are crossing the Red Sea. Crossing the Red Sea. And the third moment, it's called the walking in the desert. Walking in the desert. Exodus chapter 15 to 18. Walking in the desert. And the fourth is the Sinaitic covenant. People come to Sinai. You see, Exodus chapter 19 till Numbers chapters 10. Exodus chapter 19:1 till Numbers 10:10. This great episode is taking place here. Starting from, you can just think, right from the Genesis, you just think of the structure of the books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. These are the 5 books, no? We start from Genesis and Exodus. We come up to Exodus chapter 19. There we come along with the people to Mount Sinai. There, the people are getting ready to have the Sinaitic covenant. Okay, then the rest of the whole episode of the Sinaitic covenant is taking place there. Beginning from Exodus chapter 19, the rest of the chapter, the rest of the Exodus, Genesis, Exodus, the whole book of Leviticus till chapter 10 of the book of Numbers. The whole book, so to say, right from Exodus chapter 19, the rest of the book of Exodus, the whole book of Leviticus, and till chapter 10 of the book of Numbers. This is properly at the center of Pentateuch. Then you see, right from Numbers chapter 10 onwards, you go and complete with Deuteronomy. You complete with Deuteronomy. You see, the third book that is called Leviticus, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Among them, the third book, that is Leviticus, is at the center of the 5 books. And the center book is completely dedicated in the context of the Sinaitic covenant. In the Sinaitic covenant. So literally, it is exactly at the center. at the center. And you see theologically, what is the importance of this covenant? Theologically, see, why did God choose to make a covenant with people there on Mount Sinai? Why didn't God make a covenant with people in Egypt? Why didn't God make? God would have made a covenant with the people in Egypt, and God would have brought the people out of Egypt. Okay, right from usually in the human way of speaking, that's a normal procedure. Even before starting the journey, everything is prepared well, and people are prepared. That would maybe more logic. Why didn't God do that? The theological reason is that you cannot make a covenant with a person who is not free. In your slavery, you cannot make a covenant. You cannot make a promise. You are not obliged to obey. You're not able to maintain the force of the covenant if you're in slavery. That's why, first of all, God has liberated the people. God has liberated the people from the slavery, and God made this covenant with a liberated people, exclusively in the context of the desert, being away from all the disturbances and the possible disturbances. God made this covenant with the people. You see, my dear friends, how beautiful it is. How beautiful it is. I'm just telling you from different angles how what's called the Sinaitic covenant is at the center of the religious experience of the people of God in the Old Testament. And it has got a lot to do with the New Testament. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to elaborate it. I'm just giving you the nutshell. And you see, theologically, this is the concept. That's why God had liberated the people from Egypt to make the covenant. And you see, and after that, after the signing up of the covenant, what is called, they are just what's called the tent of the meeting. After signing up the covenant, the people start the journey in search of the promised land. There you see, they take away the tent of the meeting. Tent of the meeting. What does it mean? This is a new development. This is a sign of the covenant. So far, people had only the assistance of God in the form of fire and cloud. And now, God is accompanying people, the covenant people, in and through the form of a tent of the meeting. Tent of the meeting means God is accompanying. God is simply accompanying the people, because now it's not simply wandering people. They're not nomads. They're just covenant people. Covenant people. And geographically also, you see how what's called the covenant, the Sinai can be at the center of the religious experience. You just please geographically. This is the third consideration. We had first the consideration of what's called literary consideration. Then we had the theological consideration. Now we have the geographical consideration to tell that Sinai experience is at the heart of the religious experience of the people of God. This is the third consideration. Please look at this map. Please look at this map. And here you may see a reading presentation of the moving of the people of God. And this is Egypt. This is Egypt. And people coming out of Egypt from here, getting across the Red Sea. the Red Sea. Then you see, I wanted to tell you, you see how God had taken the people for a great purification and process. Here you can come across this experience. Sorry to say, just a minute, just a moment. Sorry. I want just to show you. Meanwhile, you can just to see that. You see, this is the process. Here from Egypt, they start the journey. And actually, you see, here, this is the promised land. 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 And people, they had to walk directly from here to here. It would have been very easy. But you see how they just conducted the journey. Instead of going directly to the promised land, how they were guided. You see, just they got across the Red Sea, and they come down to the peninsula of Sinai. And here is Sinai. Here is Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai. And here they make the covenant with God. And here they stay for a long time. And you see, from here they start the journey again. And before the enactment of the covenant at Sinai, they have a long journey from Egypt to Sinai. Then after the covenant, again they have a long journey. You see, they're just wandering in the desert. They come nearby the promised land. No, but they just miss their way because of the infidelity. So we know the situation. Because of the idol worshipping. They are just moving around Padan Aram, Kadesh Barnea. They just get across. They just get across. You see, this is actually what is called Transjordan. They're just moving around here, Transjordan, and here just they come across the River Jordan again to enter into the promised land. To the promised land. This is to the promised land. And you see how far in this long journey, they started from here and they came to Sinai. And from here again, they are moving around, just moving around. They go into the other side, and just again, they are getting across River Jordan to enter into the promised land. In this long journey, please look at Sinai as the center of this journey. Here, there is a long journey from Egypt to Sinai. Again, there's a long journey from Sinai to the promised land. So, I just to conclude, in the journey of every disciple, every Christian, every Jew, from the land of slavery to the promised land, the journey is so tedious. It's a march in the desert. It's a march in the desert. But at the same time, how can you reach in the promised land, leaving apart the land of slavery? Only through a covenant, only through the Sinaitic covenant. The Sinaitic covenant is the pivotal instrument that helps you to get across the burning desert. Burning desert and a roaring Red Sea and overwhelming Jordan. There are three important hindrances that people had to face: a roaring Red Sea, burning desert, and overwhelming Jordan. And they had overcome all these hindrances through the force of the Sinaitic covenant. So I just conclude telling between the land of slavery, that is Egypt, and the land of freedom, that is the Canaan, the promised land, there is always Sinaitic covenant. Only through the Sinaitic covenant one can travel from the slavery to the freedom. Okay, thank you.